My name is Tanner Gears, and when I was 21 years old, I woke up in the hospital totally blind. That changed my life, but not nearly as much as when I became a blind job seeker, unable to get a job until I found digital accessibility. And that changed everything. And I wanted to create more opportunities for people like me, people who are blind. So we created the CAT program. It's a 14-week instructor-led job training program that teaches you how to be a digital accessibility tester. You get trained, you get certified, you get a job. So to learn more and find out if you qualify for the CAT program, go to accessibilityofficer.com.
It's for one more rep. It's for 30 more seconds. It's for crushing your personal record. To see you go from doubting to dominating. To see you move from fear to fight. For you to realize you are strong, and the only thing holding you back is you. Why do we do what we do at Revision Training? So you can see the champion within. Download Revision Fitness, the audio fitness app, from the App Store or Google Play. Or visit revisionfitnessapp.com to sign up today and start your 14-day free trial for new users.
I'm gonna keep on going. You keep going too. Come on, keep going.
Revision Fitness. Let's change the way we look at it.
Howdy, howdy, and welcome to episode 146 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg. On this episode, we are recapping the 2025 National Beat Baseball Association season, as well as the NBBA World Series, which recently wrapped up at the end of July in the St. Louis, Missouri area. And to do so, we are bringing back on a guest who is a longtime beat baseball player, Hall of Famer, and someone who's been very instrumental in the public relations for the sport in recent years. So why don't we go ahead and hit the field and get swinging toward episode 146 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. All right, so here on this episode of the podcast, I would like to welcome back Dave Benney, a longtime beat baseball player, Hall of Fame beat baseball player, and former public relations director for the NBBA. Dave, welcome back to Eyes Free Sports.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you doing this. So we definitely have a lot to get into. I'd like to just kind of recap the 2025 National Beat Baseball Association season pretty broadly, but then focus on obviously the World Series, which just wrapped up here pretty recently as well.
Let's do it.
Cool. Okay. So why don't we just dive into kind of the early stages of kind of what led up to the season? If you just want to talk about any notable, movement as far as player movement and things that happened in the offseason leading up to the 2025 season.
Well, remember the Philly Fire won their first world championship in 2024. We were also in St. Louis. We were in St. Charles, Missouri for the 2024 World Series. And the Fire won, and the hometown team, the Gateway Archers, took second. The Thunder placed third of Indy, and then the Indy Edge placed fourth. So after the season, the most significant moves were the Indy Thunder improved their roster significantly. They picked up Justin Holland, who had been with Gateway, and Tyler Rodriguez, who had been with the Thunder in their championship run of the last decade. Came home and also signed on with the Thunder. So they picked up two all-star players very quickly before the season started and added some youth and depth to their roster. So they had over 20 players on their roster for this season, by far the deepest roster in the league. And so they improved while some of the other teams, the Fire picked up Mike Coughlin to replace Tyler Rodriguez. Mark Morris stayed with the Archers, and when a lot of other Archers players left, like Chad Dillon and David Smith and Ricky Castaneda and Justin Holland, Mark Morris could have also, and he could have played anywhere, and he was this year's defensive MVP. But he stayed with the Archers, so the Archers were looking very competitive too. And David Smith, after he won his battle with cancer and was cleared to play, he latched on with the Indy Thunder also, and a lot of it was that's a deeper roster. They wouldn't have to depend on him as much, and he could sort of use back in with his health. And so that was just a really good fit also for the Thunder. So there was some movement among the top four. And of course, then the other move was Jeremy Lopez coming to pitch for the Indy Edge, replacing for this year for Kyle Kennedy, who wasn't available, and bringing a few other players from Texas with him, like Grant Simpson, who is one of the rookies of the year in 2024. So those top four teams entered the season, obviously, as the teams to beat. And so that's where you were starting the season. Now, once the season started, the Indy Thunder quickly established themselves, I think, as the top team. They won a tournament out in Las Vegas with half their roster. The Archers took second and played them tough in the finals, but the Thunder won. And then the Thunder won the local tournament down in Greenwood, Indiana, that the Indy Edge put on. Thunder won that one. Indy Edge won the Oklahoma tournament with a close win in the championship over the Archers. And the Thunder didn't compete in that tournament. And the Thunder won their home tournament in Indy over the Edge, and then won the Bolingbrook tournament over the Archers. So the Thunder basically won every tournament they played in, and didn't lose a game heading into the World Series. But the Edge and Archers had some success, and then when the Beast of the East tournament came around, which is the annual two-leg East Coast tournament, the Philly Fire won that, and New Jersey took second. So those were the teams that were really sort of the favorites going into the World Series.
Gotcha. Yep. So obviously the Philly Fire didn't have quite as much momentum, going into this World Series, kind of coming off their championship, would you say?
Well, no, but they played their best ball. Now, they hadn't had their whole team together, and they lost some games early in the season, but they were really playing their best ball heading into the World Series. They won the Beast of the East, and they were really dominant doing it. And
Gotcha.
So they impressed the seeding committee enough that they ended up getting the number one seed as defending champs, and sort of looked like they were peaking at the right time. And the Indy Thunder, the 2 seed, even though they hadn't lost a game all year. And there was quite a bit of discussion over that, but that's how it played out. So the Fire actually went into the World Series as the top seed.
Gotcha. Interesting. So then as far as the World Series,
the Thunder were 2. The Edge were 3, and Gateway was 4. And the reason that mattered this year was because with only 19 teams, the number 1 seed was going to get a bye in that first game on Tuesday in the round robin. So they were the one team that wasn't going to have to play until 11. And so the Fire got rewarded with that. And so that's how the World Series began.
Right. I see. So then, diving into the World Series. So once again, it was held in the St. Louis area, this time on the Illinois side. And I know there were 2 locations for the series this year. Is that kind of uncommon, just historically?
Yeah, it is. And it's unfortunate. It was unfortunate for our hosts, and it was unfortunate with us, and it created, on both sides, I think, a lot of logistical issues. But unfortunately, the facility that we had used last year, Slyman Brothers Complex out in St. Charles, which was amazing, was unavailable to us this year. And we found that out late last fall. And so they sort of had to scramble to find facilities that were natural grass and that had enough fields that could safely host it. So we ended up being split up between 2 complexes. That's not the first time it's ever happened, but it's rare. And these 2 complexes were a significant distance from one another in the east suburbs of St. Louis, across the river in Illinois, but in the Metro East, as we call it. So they were about 20 minutes apart, and one complex could host 5 games, the other one could host 4 games. And so it did have to be split up.
Right. And I am curious, I don't know if you know just the logistics of how it was decided, which games were played where?
Well, the one thing that I can tell you from the public relations standpoint and directing our stream team is we wanted to keep our stream team at one complex all week long so that we didn't have to move them from and the equipment and all that from complex to complex. And so at least for Tuesday, the games that we were planning on featuring as our games of the day, those brackets were going to be at the main complex because that's where we were going to be. And one of them was out of bracket A, the first one, which was the 9 versus the 10, which was 10 versus 11, which was Austin and Cleveland. And then the other one was Gateway and Taiwan in the afternoon, 4 versus 7 out of bracket D. So those two. And then, and plus bracket A only had one game going at a time because there was a bye, remember. That was only a 3-team bracket with the the Fire, Cleveland, and Austin. And so, and then there was just another one thrown in. So on Tuesday, that's how it worked. A, D, and E were at the main complex, and then pools B and C, 4 games total in each time slot. They were down in Caseyville, Illinois, at the Reinecker complex. Once we got to Wednesday, the top of the bracket, so 1 versus 16, 2 versus 8 versus 9, and so forth. The top of what would be the bracket, those went to Edwardsville to the main complex at Glen Ed, and then the bottom of the bracket went to Reinecker. And then when it came to Thursday, I think they were trying to keep winners bracket games at Glen Ed. Right. So that's how they determined it. I don't have an issue with that. Some of the field assignments at the specific complexes were a problem. But as far as which complexes they assigned the games, what they were trying to do is avoid, and they couldn't completely avoid it. There were a few teams on Wednesday that had to switch complexes, who lost at one complex and then had to switch to a loser's bracket game at another one and so forth. But what they were trying to do was keep teams at the same complex all day as much as possible.
I see. Makes sense. Obviously, a lot of factors to juggle in that case with the 2 sites.
Right. And we did a decent job of that.
Sure.
Where the problem came in was with field assignments. For instance, there was only one game at the main complex in the 8 o'clock slot on Wednesday morning. Now, those are the tail games. Now, you start in double elimination, but you got 19 teams. So 14 plays 19, 15 plays 18, and 16 plays 17 to fill out your bracket. And then double elimination starts at 11. So you had one game at 8 o'clock at that complex. And for whatever reason, it was assigned to the field way in the back corner of the complex, all the way by the cornfields, farthest away from the parking lots and the outhouses and the other amenities that were there. There was no other game being played on any other field. Now, both teams at different times had come up and requested that we move them to a field that was close to the front of the complex due to the heat, shortages of volunteers, and so forth. And it didn't happen. And that was, one of the things that I felt was one of our shortcomings. That game could have been moved to any number of fields at that complex at that time slot to make it more visible to the public coming into the park and for the convenience of the teams. And that didn't happen. That's something that they need to work on.
Right. Absolutely. Definitely agree with that.
But as far as the fields, as the complexes, that was a rare situation, and I think we juggled it as best we could.
Sure. So then in terms of some of the early games, if you just want to talk about any surprises, any notable outcomes on that first day or that second day.
So last year when we did this conversation after the World Series, I mentioned to you that on Tuesday, now last year with 20 teams, there were a total of 30 games, and 29 of those 30 games, the higher seed won on Tuesday.
That's right.
It was not so lopsided this year. There were a few upsets on Tuesdays. Now, my friends from Oklahoma will argue whether their win over Chicago was an upset or not, but that was the first one where a lower seed beat a higher seed, and that happened bright and early in the morning. That was a 12 over a 9. Austin beat Cleveland, which was an 11 over a 10. That's not a big upset, but that got our morning going. So we already knew we were 2 down going into the second games of the day. And so there were little ones like that on Tuesday, but the craziness really started on Wednesday. When we got into double elimination almost immediately, there were lower seeded teams that were winning.
So let's dive into some of those. I know, like you said, it started out early on Tuesday and then a lot more Wednesday.
Yeah, so, and one of the frustrating things for me as the stream team director is, and you never know this until afterwards, we were wrong both times on our games of the day on Wednesday. So our first game of the day was Boston and Oklahoma, which was an 8 versus a 9. The math says that's going to be a really good game, and it was. It wasn't that it was a bad game. But at the same time, our second choice for our game of the day at that same time slot was New Jersey and Chicago, which was the 5 versus the 12, as Chicago had got knocked down to the 12 day before with Oklahoma, right? So, and those two teams ended up playing the longest game that I can find recorded innings-wise in history at the World Series. They played a 10-inning game. Chicago won it on a walk-off. Bill Andrum walked it off, and the 12 beat the 5 right there. So that sort of started throwing things topsy-turvy. And then, of course, that opened that part of the bracket up to BCS, who then went and beat New Jersey. And, I'm sure we'll get into them later when we spotlight teams, but they were one of the stories of the tournament. So you had, Austin beat Taiwan in a 10 over a 7. And so you had a lot of interesting results going on almost immediately that really opened the bracket up to where, teams that, were seated in one spot didn't finish anywhere close to that, either up or down. It really got crazy between the number 5 seeds and the number 12 or 13 seeds. Really, there was some really, really good action on Wednesday and even into Thursday.
Right. Interesting. So obviously, compared to last year, like you're saying, just very different. A lot of eyeballs, a lot of ears, I think, were perked up by some of these early results, right?
Sure. No, and anytime you have teams that start going on Cinderella runs, like BCS, like Chicago, like Oklahoma, people really start paying attention. A lot of times, especially in the last several years in the league, you've had the same several teams that you've been seeing on Thursday and on Friday. And with the top 4, I think that was the case. The top 4 still were what we thought they were going to be. But after that, you really had stories that into Thursday or Friday, you're like, wow, what are these teams going to do? I mean, who knew that our game of the day elimination game stream on Thursday evening under the lights was going to be BCS and Oklahoma? And they earned it. They both pulled. BCS beat New Jersey and then beat Cleveland, and did it with a roster of basically at that point 7 players.
Wow! And
they played 9 games without subs, as it were. And then in Chicago, they got a big win over Taiwan. They got the win over New Jersey. Oklahoma knocked off Austin. So there was a lot of action. So there was a lot of fans and spectators who were still paying attention really late into the tournament because their teams were doing so well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know you mentioned the Oklahoma Lookouts too. I mean, very new team and certainly made a run this year and made a lot of noise, which was cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. 3 years in and they finished 6th.
Amazing.
And they split with Chicago. They lost the 6th place game, but they were in that game. And so, you just wonder if they had beaten Boston, but they had to play their way all the way back after that.
Right. Right.
You know, they lost that 8-9 game. You lose that 8-9 game, man, it's tough to finish in the top 10. You lose the octafinal, as I call it. You lose in the round of 16, man, you're really up against it. So they won, they had to win a bunch of games to get back in the mix.
No doubt. Yeah.
And then Boston almost beats Philly. That's the other thing. So then Wednesday evening, we get to the quarterfinals, and we decide the game of the day is going to be the 4-5 matchup. Why not? It's Chicago and Gateway on the Illinois side of St. Louis. You know, it's the battle for Illinois. Everybody wants to see that. And it was the one game where Chicago's offense really didn't show up, and Gateway won in a wipeout. And meanwhile, on the field right behind us, the 1-8 matchup, Philly had to come back late and walk Boston off. Otherwise, that would have thrown things totally out of whack. So even some of the games where the favorites won, they were exciting right to the end, man. The players and the teams made the World Series happen in spite of some of the things, the logistical stuff behind the scenes. Though they really showed up and showed out, and it was a beautiful thing to see.
No doubt. Yep. And before I forget, I definitely want to acknowledge the Taiwan home run, making their first appearance at the series in many years. And just how was that kind of received? I'm curious. I'm sure kind of injected a little something different into the tournament, right?
Yeah, that was really cool. And we didn't really know what to expect from them from a competitive standpoint. We had seen some video on them, but it was kind of old. And we knew a few of the players that were coming back, but this is 8 years later. And then we had heard about a couple of their newer players and their prowess and how good they were. And a couple of them were. 99 for sure. Hank Ho was excellent. And then the Wolf Xiang was awesome as well. And a couple of their new guys. But so it started early. Sunday, the first day that a lot of teams arrived, the Taiwanese hosted a welcome celebration, little picnic for us, which was really nice out at a park there in town. And so we got to visit a little bit then. And then, of course, it was great to have their matchup with Gateway as one of the game of the days to start off the World Series. As it turned out, Gateway played well and they dominated that game. But I didn't think Taiwan had played bad, and you just knew they were going to be at least a factor. They were going to win some games, and they did. And they lost a tough one to Chicago on the Dustin Youngren walk-off. Otherwise, they would have been playing for 5th and 6th, or they would have actually at least still been in the mix. And they'd have played the Edge on Friday morning instead of the Comets. So, that's how close that was for them. And they ended up finishing 7th. So I think that was really cool for Taiwan. It's not what they're used to based on their history, where they were playing in championship games every year they came. But it was cool to see them, and it's nice. It's the first time since the pandemic that we've had an international team come, and so that's a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I would hope to see, the DR, I know, had a team at one point. I believe Toronto, some others as well. So hopefully down the road we'll continue to see more of those come back, or even some new ones pop up.
Yeah, that's always the hope, and it's not cheap to get here and to be able to attend our World Series from across the world like that. And so, you just hope that they can continue to send a team, and and maybe that'll grow into something even beyond Taiwan. So, but it was nice to have them back, and they competed very hard, and they were sportsmen about it. They always are. So it was cool to have them.
Definitely. Yep. So I know at one point we did have a preview of the championship matchup with the Indy Thunder against the Indy Edge, and that game turned out to be a pretty high-scoring affair, if you want to talk about that one.
Oh, what a preview it was. It was what they call in my neck of the woods a barn burner, because we got to have a lot of barns around here.
Oh, yeah.
And that was Edge and Thunder healthy and at their peak. And it was, Jared Woodard and Jeremy Lopez going toe-to-toe. And it was players that had played together, played against one another, grown up together in some cases. everything you would want from a rivalry game with a lot on the line. I mean, the winner was going to have, be one game away from playing for a championship. The loser of that game was going to have to play 3 the next day. And, you just wonder, and you knew at some point, as I'm calling the game with Rosina, it's probably coming down to the last at bat.
Sure.
And the Thunder have the last at bat. But you look back at how things turned out, and you think, if the Edge had held on to that lead and somehow won that game, how much healthier would they have possibly been, even if it had been Thunder and Edge going into Saturday? And could that have made a difference for them? I think the Edge really needed that game more than the Thunder did, for the simple reason that the Thunder were deeper and fresher, and things may have been different if the Edge had won that. But as it was a great game. It went down to the last at bats. Gerald Dykes got the game-winning hit, walked it off, and that was the best game I've seen all year, and probably the best game I've seen at the World Series. Well, among the top, I'd say, handful of games I've seen at the World Series over the last decade. That was special.
Wow. Yeah. And it was 29-28 in the final, right?
Yep, 29-28 it was. And both teams at one point or other in the game had pretty significant leads, and they just kept throwing haymakers at one another until the ump finally told them the game was over.
Wow.
And it was incredible. It was a preview of the championship game, and it really was, because that was the strongest we were going to see the Edge all week, and so that really kind of was the championship game in a sense.
That is true, yeah. So then in terms of the Friday games, anything else you want to mention there, or just the day before the World Series, the championship? Well,
once you get to Friday, there's only 6 teams that are left in the running in the championship hunt. Everybody else is playing for placement. Most of them are playing at 8 a.m. on Friday morning. I think the significant thing about Friday, Wednesday and Thursday had been played on modified schedules, 6:30 a.m., 9:30 a.m., and 6 p.m. to stay out of the heat of the day, because of the dangers of not only the heat and the humidity and the reported heat index, but what people have to remember, and what those smartphone apps don't pick up on, is that we're in a drainage basin next to a major river. So that's a big body of water. And you got cornfields there with corn stalks that are ripening, that are giving off, giving off evaporation. So your heat index in that specific location is going to be a few degrees higher than it is, in other locations. And so we really were behind the 8 ball. And so we modified the schedules on Wednesday and Thursday. And some of them, including myself, had made the recommendation early on Thursday that we modify the schedule on Friday. And that wasn't done. The NBBA elected not to do that. So we played on a normal 8 a.m., 11 a.m., and 2 p.m. schedules. So you had 2 teams knocked out at 8 a.m., and those were Oklahoma and Chicago. So then you had the Archers and the Fire playing in an elimination game at 11, the Archers and the Edge playing in an elimination game at 11, and then the Fire and the Thunder playing in the winner's bracket final, in effect, to see who goes to the championship game undefeated. And you had those games, and of course, the Edge beat the Archers in a game that was weird because on a technicality, they didn't let the Archers use any subs.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they should have, but they didn't. And so the Archers had to play that game in that heat after that week as the host team. And because of a Scrivener's error made by volunteers that was not caught by officials, the players paid the price because they couldn't use any subs. So the Archers got knocked out by the Edge, and I'm not saying it affected the outcome of the game, but that's, that there's a thing about putting the players first, and that, I didn't feel like that happened in that situation. I'll just be frank about that. It's a Scrivener's error. Everybody turns in a roster by July 1st, so you know who the players that are listed on the roster. As long as it doesn't affect the batting order at the time of the start of the game, if that's something that's missed by volunteers, the athletes and competitors ought not pay the price in the biggest game of their season. And it, it was a little bit of an embarrassment to the host team, and I feel bad that happened. Edge won that game, so they moved on. The Thunder beat the Fire rather convincingly. They put up 37 runs on the board. Booker said that he thought that was the best game Jared pitched all year, and Jared pitched a lot of good games. But the Thunder were on point. And so the Thunder moved on, and the Edge and Fire had to play one more time at 2 o'clock. There was a request made that game be moved to 6 o'clock to get it out of the heat of the day. It wasn't. It was played at 2 o'clock. There was lights. There was no reason the game couldn't have been played at 6, but it was played at 2 o'clock. I think the heat had an effect on the players. I think it had an effect on the umpires, the officials. Certainly we felt it with our stream team. But in the end, the Edge won that game to set up the rematch between the Edge and the Thunder. But the Edge paid a high price for playing 3 games back that day because they lost 3 of their starters to injury. And so by the time they played the Thunder on Saturday in the rematch, they were so attrited that there was a competitive disadvantage.
Right. Yep. And like you said, the Thursday matchup was definitely better overall just because of health, everything.
It was pivotal. If the Edge win that game, they only have to play 1 game on Friday if they win that, which, who knows. But in any event, they're not playing at 8 o'clock on Friday. They would have had at least a little bit of an opportunity to rest up. I really think that Edge Thunder game on Thursday was the pivotal game in the tournament.
Absolutely.
And it was masterful. I mean, it was 29-28, but there were defensive plays being made, and there was some coaching moves on both sides that were good. I mean, it was, there was masterful pitching. It was one of those type of games that you will see at the World Series, which is supposed to be the pinnacle tournament of our sport. And they really did it proud.
Right. So then moving on to the championship game, Championship Saturday. So I know it was close early on, and then the Thunder seemed to pull away relatively quickly after that.
Well, they did, and they started out hitting the ball and scoring a lot like they usually do. But then toward the end of the game, their defense really picked up, and they were making plays at multiple positions and multiple levels on the field. And then even when they were putting subs in the game, their subs were coming into the game and making plays. And it was really a nice capstone for Booker and that team. They ran the table 26-0 on the year. I can't find another team in the record books that has won that many games without having a loss in one season because – it used to be they didn't play as many local tournaments, so you wouldn't play 26 games in a year. But that team never lost. That's a very difficult thing to do. And, they were playing a depleted Edge squad. It is true. Right. And Jeremy Lopez battled until the very end with the Edge team, with the players he had. But the Thunder played very well on Saturday. In fact, they played well on Friday. After the first couple innings against the Fire. They had some issues the first couple innings with their defense. But toward the end there, the Thunder were hitting on all cylinders. They were on a mission. They were trying to achieve that one goal that they had been talking about all year, about getting back to the championship and winning it. And they did.
Definitely. Yep. So this was the Indy Thunder's 6th World Series championship.
And how cool for David Smith.
Oh, yeah.
To start in the championship game. He hadn't gotten a lot of playing time this year, but after everything he's overcome, to start in the championship game and go 3 for 4 before finally being subbed out, I thought that was really cool for him. And I had said several times 4 championship games he had played in and come up on the short end. That was just with the Jets. That's not even counting last year with the Archers. So really 5 in a row, the man had played in the championship game and come up on the losing end. And then not only does he win the ring this year, but he didn't just do it riding the pine. He scored 3 of their runs in the title game. So that's that's a great way to end it for D. Smith, one of my favorite players.
No doubt. Hats off to him. Just like you said earlier, everything he's been through health-wise, was just so incredibly happy to see him get that ring.
I mean, and you can go on and on about, the Thunder. I mean, Zach Buehler hit 900 for the World Series. That's the highest batting average we can find at the World Series by a player. Gerald Dykes had the walk-off against the Edge. Cody Jeffries made the offensive team, and he was just great from the leadoff spot for them. People were coming in like Ikram, Joel Tolby, Chris Dunleavy, Adam Rodenbeck, anybody who Booker would call on, and then Tyler Rodriguez, who didn't even become available until Friday, and then frankly struggled because he hadn't been playing all week for the first couple innings that he was in on Friday. Then he bounced back and made an impact on Saturday. So they really brought it, and they said they were going to do it, and they did it.
Exactly. And just historically, just kind of put into context how this 6th championship ranks, within the NBBA.
So Austin won 7 in a row in the 90s, and then they won 2 more in 14 and 15. So as far as I can recall, Austin would be your leader in the clubhouse with 9 championships as a program. I want to say Albuquerque had 8, either 7 or 8. They had a bunch in the 80s. The West Coast Dogs had 7 in 3 different. They had a 3-peat and then a 4-peat separated by a few years. And then you got the Thunder there with 6. And this team was their first undefeated team, regional tournaments and World Series, of any of their championship teams. They went 10-0 in 2020 in the pandemic season, but we didn't have an officially sanctioned World Series that year. But every other year they had, they'd show up at a local tournament with a split squad and they'd drop a game. I know our Jets beat them in 2019, which I think was the Thunder's best team, was their 2019 team, with all the young guns starting and healthy. But this was the first year they went undefeated for a season, so I think that was real special to them. Where does it rank in context with some of their other championship teams? I'll still say, as I sit here, I think the 2019 team in Tulsa was probably their strongest, because I think the Jets were one of the best teams of all time that year also, and the Thunder beat the Jets 3 times, including twice at the World Series, 30-28, and then in extra innings in the championship game. And not many other teams over the years, I think, would have beat that Jets team. So offensively, this Thunder team could have hit with anyone, any of those teams. Speed, maybe similar. But I think defensively, I think a couple of those Thunder Dynasty teams were still a little bit better. That said, this Thunder team made a lot of history this year. So, and 6 championships since 2016, it speaks for itself.
Right. And we can also say, a team from Indianapolis now has won pretty much most of the last, 9 titles, with the Edge having a couple.
8 of the
recently.
last 9.
That's right.
Yep, 8 of the last 9. And the one they didn't win was the Philly Fire, and Tyler Rodriguez, Indianapolis boy, was a big part of that. And so, now he's tied Eric, his big brother, with 7 championships. So we'll see what happens going forward from there. But you're talking about these kids that are in there, and they're still in their mid-20s, and they're counting rings now on 2 hands.
Absolutely. Yep. That's a lot of hardware.
And that was Jared's second perfect season. At least that included a World Series, because that 2007 Kansas All-Stars team, which a lot of people who have been around for a while would consider them up there with the best single-season teams of all time. They were perfect in 2007, and that was Jared's first championship. So he's had a couple perfect seasons now.
Wow, amazing. Just a couple other observations / notes. So definitely shout out to the New York Bombers, a team I got to play with a couple years ago. I know they were back at the series after a few years of not being able to attend. I know they're kind of restructuring.
Yeah, and they were cool. They were cool, Greg. They were on my floor.
Oh,
and,
cool.
and I'm glad you brought that up, if I may, for a moment. That's a really cool segue, because one of the things that happened this year that I haven't been able to do in some other years is I really got to meet a lot of teams and people on teams that I hadn't really gotten to spend a whole lot of time with before. The Bombers were on my floor, so I got to hang out and talk to a lot of the New York Bombers, Boston Strong, Tyler Tigers. My floor of the hotel was filled with a bunch of teams, as it turned out, with people that I hadn't really gotten to spend a whole lot of time with over the years. And then one of my most indelible memories, lasting memories from the 2025 World Series, was on Saturday night after the banquet, coming across and spending about an hour with the Minnesota Millers, and having a cigar and a couple of beverages with the Millers, who I really had never really gotten to know. They don't come to a lot of tournaments. Yep. And so I knew Steve Guerra, of course, from our work with the league. But I got to spend time with Coach Van Dyne and his son Evan, who is, one of our better defensive players over the last 20 years, who was a rival of mine when I was playing, but I didn't really get to know, and Riley Schmitz and Torrey Andres and some of the Millers, and they're really decent people. And I was having experiences like that all week long, whether it was BCS or, like you said, the New York Bombers. So, I appreciate some of those teams that we don't always see very much of, especially here in the Midwest. Spending a lot of time with them, that was really cool.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
And the Bombers are going to get better. They got some rookies, Greg. They've got some players coming up. And they've got a younger pitcher now, Matt Galante. The Bombers, I think, have good days ahead.
No question. Yep. Definitely shout out to the Sirens as well. I know they were not able to get off the schneid win-wise, but great to see the all-female team back again this year.
No, but they've got some up-and-comers, too.
Yeah.
Caitlin Overshiner, we know she's got defensive skills, and we've seen those the last couple World Series. But they've got a couple of other players that are younger that are coming up. And so, they're still developing their players, and we'll see where they go. But, they're not just some flash in a pan now after 3. They've been to 3 World Series. There have been teams in the NBBA that have started up that have not made 3 World Series. So hats off to them.
Right. Great point. So definitely, as someone who watched a lot of the streams, I know, it was obvious there were some ejections for foul language, different things. Anything you want to mention on that front?
Well, you're going to get me a little bit fired up on this. And here's what I'm going to say. And I'm speaking now as David Benney, commentator and fan and longtime player, and not be on behalf of anybody else. I hadn't seen, we usually have one ejection maybe in 2 or 3 years. They're not very common. I think after the first ejection on Thursday, which was of a player who ended up winning an all-tournament award on both sides of the ball. I mean, Nick Malharen's one of our best. After that ejection on Thursday, which was on our Game of the Day stream, I think there was a little bit of monkey see, monkey do in another game that we had. I think it is interesting to note that all 3 of the ejections, we had 3 players eject, 2 players and 1 field spotter. 2 of them are Hall of Famers, and one of them is Nick Malharen, who's former batting champion and is a multi-time All-Star. And these are in big games and high-profile and high-leverage situations late in the tournament. All 3 of them occurred on live streams. 2 of them are on our Game of the Day streams, and the other one was on a bonus stream that Rosina did. I went back and watched all 3 of them. Only one did I hear foul language because it was dropped at home plate, and that player had been warned already during the game with an official warning while out in the field. So now you probably have to eject him whether you want to or not. The other two, I neither heard behind the live stream at the scores table, nor when I went back and reviewed the live streams. Now, if you're going to do that, I understand enforcing the rules, but you better be real sure. Okay, and there is some discretion involved because you've got players and teams that are paying a lot of money to get there. They've been training all season long. And these are games now where that, the last thing any umpire, any responsible umpire wants to do is to affect the outcome of a game and inject themselves into a game in a situation that affects the outcome of the game. So you have to be careful doing that. The one on Friday afternoon I thought was especially egregious. The reason why I say that is because the umpire, in good spirits, is an umpire who likes to, kind of converse and socialize with the other team during the game. The problem with that is it's all fun and games until it's not. And the only one with authority to eject is the umpire. If I misinterpret something the umpire says to me during a game, I can't throw him out. But if he hears me wrong, thinks he hears me wrong, misunderstands me or whatever, he can throw me out of the game. So umpires have to be real careful doing that. I was very disappointed with the ejection of the field spotter in the Friday game. The consequence of an ejection at the World Series is they're disqualified for the next game. Now, we're talking about a field spotter. That's someone who is out there in a position that's designed to help the blind and visually impaired competitors play the game. And so you got to be real careful when you eject a sighted volunteer like that. And frankly, I didn't hear any language. My understanding was the umpire apologized after that, but the damage is still done. And so what disappointed me was I felt like there was a lack of discretion. Umpires under the rule book have the right to eject players for flagrant violations of the policy regarding foul language. If it's at home plate in front of spectators, something like that, that's, and the player's been warned, that's flagrant. If it's out on the field because you pound your fist because you missed the ball, or if you're running down the baseline and you trip and you utter a four-letter word that's nowhere near spectators and nowhere near anybody, there should be a little bit of grace. That's my opinion. And I hold the same opinion about the Archers situation without being able to, not being able to sub. If it's a Scrivener's error made by volunteers, why are you going to punish the players? Right. In the biggest game of the year that they've worked for, plus you're in the heat, you might need those subs. There's got to be some grace. Otherwise, you're not putting the players first. It becomes more about the officials than it is about the players. And as a former player and the PR director until recently, I have an issue with that.
Yeah, I appreciate
Greg,
your perspective on that.
That's how I honestly feel about it, and it's not personal. I know each and every one of everybody that was playing at that World Series and officiating it. But there has to be some common sense, in not only how we schedule the games, but also how we officiate them and, how we conduct themselves, whether or not there's a camera on or whether or not there's a live stream going and the public's watching or not. It's interesting to note there were zero ejections of players or volunteers in games that were not filmed. Every ejection that occurred at the World Series was on a game that was being filmed. And that makes me nervous as someone who was a trailblazer in the whole live streaming concept for beat baseball, because I don't want players, unless they're competing, and I certainly don't want officials performing for the camera. And that's all I have to say about that.
Sure. I appreciate that. And
You sure you want to ask me another one, Greg? 'Cause I'm about half fired up here.
And just to note that, for those who might not be quite as familiar with the NBBA and the league, I mean, some of these officials have been around a long time, umping and officiating these games, right?
Sure. And we need to make it easier on them. All right. We need to have water available for them and ice under every scorer's table so that they can dip in between, innings, and because they're out there in the sun too. And they, unlike, some of us, unlike the players that get to get under their tents when they're hitting, when they're up to bat, these guys, these umpires, these guys and gals, they're out there in the sun. They're out there baking in the heat. And so we can make it easier on them with scheduling, with having supplies available, with making sure that if there are balls that need to be delivered, that we're doing that in a more timely fashion so that we're not holding up the game. There was one situation where we had to wait almost 10 minutes for balls to get delivered to a field. And now what you're doing is you're making the players and the umpires and everybody bake in the sun, and there's no ball being played. And so, there's preparedness is a part of that. But there are things that we can do to help our umpires and officials and scorekeepers besides giving them, a stipend and lodging and a pat on the back and an attaboy. People tend to work when they're most comfortable. That's one thing I've learned as a business owner. They tend to work at their best in an environment where they're comfortable. And so we got to do what we need to do to make them comfortable while they're officiating these games. Because they're humans too. They're not computers. And on Friday afternoon, when it's baking hot, it can affect judgment. I've seen it affect players' judgment. I've seen it affect officials' judgment. And I've seen it affect the broadcasters. I spilled my water twice all over my rosters in one game on Friday afternoon. And I never do that. I'm never that blind. It was tough, right? It was. And we were under a tent. I had the sun was beating on the back of us because the angle it was coming in, but we had it better than the umpires and the players at that point.
Wow. Yep. Definitely a lot to think about. A lot of factors. I mean, any event like this, there's so much that goes into it. And then just kind of thinking about how can things be improved or for everyone involved, like you're saying, the players, the volunteers, the officials, fans, broadcasters.
Well, I mean, there's always room for improvement. And, this year was a little bit of a different year because we were at multiple complexes, which means we had to split up officials between multiple complexes. And so, the biggest heat wave of the summer happened to hit St. Louis right at the time of the World Series. So, some of it was beyond our control, but preparedness, common sense, flexibility, and cohesive management are all things that I think could help make it better for the players and the volunteers and the competitors. And the fans as well. That's the criticism. The upside is, boy, did the players make it happen. We had some games this past week. I mean, we're talking walk-off hits, home runs. How about them Outlaws? The BCS Outlaws came in ranked 13th. Their Rookie of the Year candidate didn't make the trip with them. Then they lost a starter early in the week, so they were down to basically 6 players and a brand new rookie sub. And they took those 6 players, and they ended up finishing 8th. And they were one of the most fun teams to cover all week. Justin Romack, Hillary Oswald, Alex Quick, who had a breakout World Series. He was toward the top on both sides of the ball, and we thought he'd be good. I don't think most of us expected that out of him. Almost reminds me of what Dustin Youngren for the Comets did a couple of years ago, and he put himself on the map. So, there were, amidst all of the sort of chaos and logistical stuff, there were a lot of great stories from the week. Mark Morris finally getting his defensive MVP after having come close, and he's just been a dominant player. He's probably consensus the best player we've got now. So he did that in front of his home fans. And Dustin Youngren hit another home run. Zion Prince, a local kid from St. Louis, he hit a home run. So amidst all that, was, if you were just watching the games and you didn't know anything else, you saw some really, really awesome competition. It really was a cool, showcase of our sport really on a world stage. I mean, we had fans tuned in from all over the world. Rosina was saying we had people watching from the Philippines. We had people watching from West Africa. We had people, of course, watching from Taiwan, Central and South America. We had people watching from Canada. I had a friend from Edmonton who was tuned in.
Nice.
So that was really cool, and hopefully that helps down the road.
Sure. Yep. And you think of, if those folks were watching live in certain parts of the world, just what time it was where they were, and, probably in the middle of the night in some cases, but they had it on. So I definitely want to acknowledge Mind's Eye Radio, big supporter of this podcast, Jason Frazier and his team, also the Lighthouse in St. Louis. I know both of those organizations were instrumental in helping put on this World Series, this event, just like last year. So definitely wanted to give them a shout out as well.
Yeah, no doubt. They put it on for us 2 years in a row. They were faced with some challenges this year that they weren't faced with last year. But they showed themselves to be pretty versatile. And the bottom line is the mission is to carry the games to completion and determine a champion. And in that, it was a success because all the games were carried to a completion and a championship was determined. And so everybody got their money's worth as far as the tournament went. And so for your host, that's really all you can ask for. Jason Frazier, I think we've made a lifer of Jason Frazier in Beat Baseball. I think he's going to stick around. He's working on other things and other tournaments for the organization. They're going to need him. And so hopefully he can help out as well, because that's another hand on deck that the organization desperately needs at this point. We need the Jason Fraziers around with the motivation, the time, and the resources to be able to help out and to make the game available to as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Well said. So before we wrap up here, I know that you did announce on social media you're stepping away from your roles with the league. Anything you want to mention here on the podcast about that?
I am. I've been doing the same thing job-wise that I've been doing for the last 15 years. I'm just doing about twice as much of it now. And at this point, with the direction that the league wants to head in, I think after 25 years, it's time for me to step back, step aside, allow new leadership to come in and see what they can do to try to lead the league forward. There's a lot of reasons for it, but at this point, I'll just leave it at sometimes, it's time. I mean, this World Series had things that made me so proud I could almost cry, and there were things that frankly were extremely disappointing, but in aggregate, when it's time to step away from something, it's time. And I've dedicated every summer of the last 25 years to Beat Baseball. That doesn't mean that I won't be around at all. I may pop up at some local tournaments. I know we're not planning on ending the ISC Sports Network coverage of the Indy Bonanza anytime soon. And I've got a great friendship with those people. So, I'll be looking in every once in a while. But at this point, I am retiring from the NBBA as a member and as someone on their leadership team, so that I can focus on both aspects of my work and also, personal aspects of my life as well, as I enter into a long-term relationship and things of that nature. So
nice, yeah.
It's been great. It's not goodbye, because, like I said, I will, I don't sever long-standing friendships. I will still be around, and I will still look in and be available, but I will not be the voice of the NBBA going forward. And there is some succession planning in that regard. And the stream team and the public relations department and the All-Star event and all of those projects I've worked on over the last several years will be in good hands. I promise you that. And in the end, the league is going to be what its membership decides it's going to be, and it will, its success is ultimately up to the community. So, and I wish it the best going forward, and I'm, of course, going to remain a fan.
Sure. Yep. And I know just, myself and many, many others have really enjoyed your commentary on the streams, on the broadcasts, and just everything you've done, from a PR standpoint. So just wanted to thank you for all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into that. There's a lot that goes into broadcasting, and, just all the things that you can rattle off the top of your head like that is pretty impressive. So.
Well, it's a blast. It's all been great, and nobody does it alone. And I've had a great team with me to help out all the years that I've been doing it. So there's a lot of credit to be spread around. But like I tell everybody else, the greatest compliment that you can give us is to enjoy our product and to spread it around, because you never know who might be watching. So if you like our photos and short video highlight clips, thank John Lykowski, spread them around, share them around. If you like our broadcasts, then, share them around, spread them around, because, the more people that see it, the better chance it is that the sport is going to grow and have more resources to carry it on.
Absolutely. All right. Well, again, on this episode, we've been chatting with Dave Benney, aka DB. And Dave, really, really appreciate the time and just all your insight that you provided here. And again, just hats off to you on everything you've done for the league.
Thank you, Greg, and it's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you again down the road.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
To hear more episodes of the Eyes Free Sports podcast and to subscribe, search for Eyes Free Sports on your favorite podcast platform or visit eyesfreesports.com. Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter @eyesfreesports.